Let's talk about trade policy. Yes, it matters, even if it usually sounds like something only economists and politicians care about. But in reality, it shapes the price of your groceries, the car you drive, and the job you go to every morning. In 2025, trade policy stopped being background noise and became front-page news, affecting millions of lives in ways few could have predicted. That year, it hit like a thunderbolt, sudden, electrifying, and impossible to ignore. The world watched in disbelief as the rules of North American trade were rewritten overnight. Fresh off his re-election, President Trump wasted no time. He imposed sweeping tariffs, a staggering 25% on nearly all imports from Canada and Mexico, and a sharp increase to 20% on Chinese goods. These weren't just minor adjustments, they were a dramatic escalation, targeting America's biggest trading partners and sending shockwaves through the global economy. The stated goal? To protect American jobs, especially in manufacturing, and to curb the flow of fentanyl at the border, though, in reality, the latter had little to do with Canada. The message was clear. America was putting itself first, no matter the cost to its neighbors. The move was a seismic shock, not a tweak. It was, in effect, economic war on America's closest allies, Canada and Mexico, countries that had long been partners in prosperity, now suddenly cast as adversaries. Canada and Mexico were given a 30-day ultimatum to fix border security, a demand that left officials scrambling and relations fraying. The clock was ticking, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. When nothing changed, the tariffs slammed into place. Financial markets reeled, investors panicked, and the uncertainty rippled through every sector of the economy from Wall Street to Main Street. The era of America First protectionism had arrived, and the implications were dire. Suddenly, the very foundation of North American trade was in question, and the world was watching to see who would blink first. Economists and business leaders scrambled to assess the damage. Would supply chains snap? Would prices skyrocket? Could jobs really be saved, or would they vanish as companies struggled to adapt? The tariffs hit everything: steel, aluminum, agriculture, and most crucially, cars and car parts. These industries, deeply interconnected across borders, suddenly faced chaos and confusion. Ironically, the very industries Trump aimed to protect, auto manufacturing, steel, and farming, were now in the crosshairs, facing layoffs, plant closures, and mounting uncertainty. This wasn't a surgical strike, it was a sledgehammer to North America's economic engine. The integrated supply chains that had powered decades of growth were suddenly at risk of breaking apart. The gamble was enormous: millions of jobs, the stability of entire communities, and the economic future of a continent. For many, the fear was not just about lost profits, but about lost livelihoods. The storm had arrived, and everyone, from factory workers to families at home, was about to get soaked. The uncertainty was palpable, and the sense of crisis was everywhere. Welcome to the new trade war, a conflict not fought with tanks or missiles, but with tariffs, ultimatums, and the livelihoods of millions hanging in the balance. Ford Motor Company became the face of tariff panic. The moment tariffs were announced, Ford's stock and those of GM and Stellantis plummeted. Analysts warned the tariffs could wipe out all profits for America's big three automakers. Ford's business model relied on seamless North American trade, perfected over decades. Parts for a single F-150 might cross borders multiple times before final assembly. Trump's tariffs threw a wrench into this finely tuned system. The market's reaction was clear. This wasn't a temporary setback, but a fundamental threat. Costs would skyrocket, either absorbed by companies or passed to consumers. For Ford, it was a body blow from its own government. The bell had rung, and round one was already brutal. The auto industry was on the ropes. The North American auto supply chain is a marvel: complex, efficient, and fragile. Car makers treat the US, Canada, and Mexico as one giant factory floor. A single part, like a transmission, might be forged in Ohio, milled in Ontario, assembled in Mexico, and installed in Michigan. This cross-border dance happens thousands of times a day. The result? North American cars, not just American or Canadian. Trump's tariffs didn't just hit finished products, they hit every step of the process. The policy ignored how modern manufacturing works, taxing parts each time they crossed a border. The house of cards was shaking. The supply chain's efficiency was about to become its greatest vulnerability. The wind from Washington threatened to blow it all down. Here's where the pain multiplies. Tariffs aren't just a one-time fee, they're a ripple effect that spreads through every corner of the auto industry. What starts as a single policy decision quickly becomes a web of costs, confusion, and consequences for everyone involved, from factory workers to CEOs. Because parts cross borders repeatedly, tariffs stack up at every crossing. Each time a component moves from one country to another, it's taxed again, even if it's the same part making a round trip. This isn't just a minor inconvenience, it's a fundamental change to how global supply chains work. A 25% tariff isn't just applied once, it compounds, inflating costs at every stage. Take that transmission. By the time it's finished, it might have crossed borders 3 or 4 times, with tariffs piling on at each stop. The final price can be shockingly higher than anyone expected. Steel from Ohio to Canada, gears to Mexico, then back to Michigan. Each leg of the journey adds another layer of cost. What was once a seamless process now becomes a logistical headache, with paperwork, inspections, and fees slowing everything down. Each crossing adds a new tariff. It's like a toll booth that keeps charging you every time you pass, no matter how many times you've already paid. The result? American-made parts get taxed as if they were foreign. Even products built almost entirely in the US can end up with a price tag that reflects multiple rounds of tariffs, simply because of how modern manufacturing works. For Ford, the cost of building vehicles was set to explode. The company faced a future where every car rolling off the line was more expensive to make, threatening jobs and profits alike. The system designed for efficiency now multiplied taxes instead of savings. Industry experts warned that the very structure that made North American manufacturing competitive was now working against it, turning advantages into liabilities. This could shut down assembly plants on both sides of the border. American companies like Ford, GM, and Stellantis were hit hardest. These giants, with their complex supply chains, suddenly found themselves at risk of losing their competitive edge. The policy's unintended consequences cascaded through the economy. Suppliers, dealerships, and even small businesses felt the shockwaves as higher costs trickled down to every level. The promise was to help American manufacturing, to bring jobs and prosperity back home, but the reality was far more complicated. The reality was to make it unaffordable. New cars became out of reach for many families, and the dream of Made in America started to slip away. The tariff trap was set. What was meant as protection became a snare, catching businesses and consumers alike. The pain was just beginning. For the auto industry and for American workers, the true cost of tariffs was only starting to reveal itself. Canada didn't take the tariffs lying down. The announcement from Washington sent shockwaves through Ottawa, but Canadians were quick to rally together. Across the country, a sense of unity and defiance took hold, as citizens and leaders alike made it clear that Canada would not be bullied by its southern neighbor. Prime Minister Trudeau called the move very dumb and accused Trump of trying to collapse Canada's economy. He didn't mince words, standing before the press with a steely resolve that resonated with Canadians from coast to coast. Trudeau's message was not just for the White House but for every Canadian watching at home. Trudeau's defiant message, "We will never be the 51st state." It was a rallying cry, echoing through Parliament and across social media. The phrase quickly became a symbol of national pride, printed on protest signs and trending online as Canadians voiced their support for standing up to the US. Canada hit back with $155 billion CAD in retaliatory tariffs, targeting key US goods. The government moved swiftly, crafting a list of products that would hit American industries where it hurt most. The message was clear: Canada would defend its interests, no matter the cost. The list was strategic: whiskey, washing machines, ketchup, and more. Everyday items that Americans exported north suddenly became symbols of resistance. Canadian consumers were urged to buy local, and businesses scrambled to adjust to the new reality. Provinces joined in, pulling American spirits from shelves and banning U.S. firms from government contracts. Provincial leaders announced their own measures, determined to show solidarity with Ottawa and send a message that Canada's response would be felt at every level of government. Trudeau summed it up: "This is a time to hit back hard. A fight with Canada will have no winners." The gloves were off. The Prime Minister's words captured the mood of a nation unwilling to back down, even in the face of economic uncertainty. On social media, Trump threatened even higher tariffs in response. His posts fanned the flames, drawing sharp reactions from both American and Canadian audiences. The digital war of words only heightened the tension between the two countries. The standoff escalated into a game of economic chicken. Each side waited for the other to blink, as businesses, workers, and families braced for the fallout. The world watched as two of the closest allies in history became fierce rivals overnight. For the first time, the world's longest undefended border became a front line in a bitter trade war. What was once a symbol of friendship and open exchange now bristled with tension and uncertainty. The US and Canada were now locked in a high-stakes standoff. Negotiations stalled, and both sides dug in, unwilling to show weakness. The fate of billions in trade and the livelihoods of millions hung in the balance. The consequences would be felt on both sides. Factories slowed, businesses shuttered, and workers worried about their futures. The trade war was no longer just a political battle. It was a crisis, touching the lives of ordinary people in both countries. Mexico was just as defiant. President Claudia Sheinbaum condemned the tariffs as aggressive and unilateral. Her message: cooperation yes, subordination no. Mexico retaliated with tariffs on U.S. goods, targeting politically sensitive exports like pork, apples, and steel. The fallout hit global automakers and U.S. farmers alike. Instead of dividing its neighbors, the U.S. had united them, in opposition. The trade war's impact hit American wallets fast. Economists warned tariffs could cost the average household $1,000 more per year. Fuel prices soared, especially in regions reliant on Canadian imports. Groceries got pricier. Fruits and vegetables from Mexico, consumer goods from Canada and China. Retaliatory tariffs hurt U.S. exporters, but U.S. tariffs hit consumers directly. Everyday essentials, food, fuel, clothing, became more expensive. The policy was a regressive tax, hurting lower and middle-income families most. Companies passed higher costs to consumers, shrinking spending power. The cycle hurt the economy at every level. The pain was everywhere, and it was growing. The economic outlook darkened. The Dow plunged over 600 points the day tariffs hit. Bank stocks tumbled. Projections showed tariffs and retaliation could shave a full point off U.S. GDP growth. Inflation was set to rise, creating the specter of stagflation. Job losses loomed, especially in auto, agriculture, and manufacturing. The very workers the tariffs aimed to protect were now at risk. The gamble was backfiring, and the stakes were enormous. The Ford crisis exposed the fragility of American manufacturing in a globalized world. Tariffs meant to protect jobs instead shattered supply chains and trust with allies. Canada and Mexico's unified retaliation marked a new era of economic conflict. For American families, the tariffs acted as a stealth tax, making life more expensive. The dream of affordable American-made goods slipped further away. The warnings of recession and job losses became reality for many. The lesson economic nationalism can backfire, hurting those it claims to help. In a connected world, building walls comes at a steep price.